Welcome to another episode of Al-Shakal Al-Satlana, our Middle East, the Middle East of Jews, Christians, Muslims, Arabs, Druze, Circassians, you name it. This is the multicultural Middle East, and it is on fire with reports of a potential or perhaps an imminent attack by the United States, perhaps by Israel, perhaps by a consortium of Western powers against the Islamic regime, the Islamic Republic of Iran. And joining me, of course, is my many-decade friend, colleague, co-host, Khaled Abu Toameh. Khaled, great to be with you again.
Thank you, Dan, and welcome back.
Thanks. Was in the States for a few weeks, was in Washington, was in the White House, spoke to White House officials. And Khaled, what we're hearing there is that President Trump is not redlighting. He is not redlighting an Israeli action against the Iranian regime. He just wants to take it in stages. It looks like the stage of what Trump had said, optimistic negotiations, seems to be coming to a close.
Yes. I mean, a few hours ago, we heard all these reports that Israel is preparing to attack, that, we are very close to a confrontation with Iran. And immediately after that, we got this report that the negotiations between Iran and the U.S. are resuming in Oman. So apparently the threats or, these reports that Israel, of an imminent Israeli attack, have brought Iran back to the negotiating table. We saw some very arrogant statements by the Iranians recently. Apparently they misinterpreted Trump's readiness to negotiate with them, his readiness or willingness to reach some kind of an agreement as a sign of weakness. And they thought that, they could drag it on and on and on. But now it seems that, these reports have brought the Iranians back to the table. Let's wait and see what happens next week with the sixth round of talks between Iran and the Trump administration.
I'm doubtful, Khaled, with regard to negotiations, that if the American position today is zero uranium enrichment, that the Iranian regime will ever agree to that. It seems to me that it will be dead in the water, and that a lot of this is psychological warfare. It's really a game of nerves. It's a typical game of Middle Eastern. This is Middle Eastern warfare. And what seems to be happening, and you just mentioned it now, is the Iranian regime, the Ayatollah, seems to be underestimating the ability of President Donald Trump to speak Middle East and to confuse the way the Middle East knows how to confuse the West.
Don't forget, Dan, that they have more experience in negotiating than the Trump administration, and they are ready to drag it on and on and on. But there was a very important statement by the supreme leader of Iran, Khamenei, and he said, basically, who the hell are these Americans to tell us what to do? We have every right to enrich uranium. We have every right to do whatever we want. That statement is a very powerful statement because at the end of the day, this is what's going to guide Iran. They don't believe that the U.S. or any other party has the right to stop them from acquiring a nuclear bomb. And that's something that the Trump administration needs to take into consideration, even if they sign an agreement, by the way. And we've seen in the past that they can sign an agreement under pressure. That does not necessarily mean that they're going to stop their efforts to obtain nuclear weapons.
Isn't it interesting, Khaled, from a political cultural point of view, that the Iranians say the Americans don't have the right? Meaning, here are the Iranians talking about rights when they abuse and torture women who don't wear hijabs, like you remember Masa Amini, who was murdered for not wearing hijab the way she was supposed to cover herself according to Sharia, and how they hang gay people from cranes and other political opposition leaders from cranes. So they, on the one hand, they violate every human rights and civil rights norm known to the West and known to mankind. And at the same time, they're talking about the United States and the West being arrogant and not dictating rights.
Not only that, Dan, but what they're saying is no one has the right to meddle in the internal affairs of Iran. At the same time, here are the Iranians or the Iranian regime meddling in the internal affairs of Syria, of Lebanon, of the Palestinians, of Yemen, of Iraq. And, there's a long list over there through their terror proxies. In Arabic, we call it waqaha, which is like chutzpah, So here's the Iranian regime lecturing us about meddling in the internal affairs of other countries or other parties or other people, while they are the ones who are doing it on a daily basis over the past few decades, actually.
It's something that reminds me of a lot of the work that you've done on the Palestinian file, where Arafat and then Mahmoud Abbas, otherwise known as Abu Mazen, has said very similar things about Israel, that Israel is meddling in the internal affairs of the Palestinians. It's a common theme across the Middle East. They do exactly what they accuse their enemies and adversaries of doing. They're projecting themselves.
Dan, it would be great if Israel were meddling or was meddling in the internal affairs of
We'd have a better situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Palestinians for the past 18 years have been ruled or governed by two bad parties, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. And they've been fighting each other. Israel did not tell them to go to war. Israel did not tell Hamas to stage a coup against the Palestinian Authority in 2007 and kick the Palestinian Authority out of Gaza. Israel did not prevent the Palestinian Authority from investing international aid for the welfare of the Palestinians. Israel did not stop Hamas for 17 years from investing money in building schools and hospitals and boosting the economy in Gaza. So, when you think about it, at the end of the day, it's really a pity that Israel is not meddling in the internal affairs of the Palestinians, because the situation would have been much better. But now it's too late. After October 7th, things have changed.
Very radically changed.
Yes.
And in fact, one change that we're seeing as we speak in our Middle East podcast here in studio is a man by the name of Yasser Abu Shabab, who is a local, I guess you might call him a warlord, you can call him a crime family. He is part of what is known as the Popular Resistance Committee. Now, that's a long-standing family clan. And Abu Shabab.
He belongs to the Tarabin clan.
Oh, the Tarabin clan.
Tarabin clan.
Right.
And some of their members or are affiliated with the resistance committees in Gaza. They belong to various groups. Some of them are ISIS-inspired groups, Salafi groups, both in Gaza and in Sinai.
So there's this huge drama going on because this week in Israel, a member of Knesset, Avigdor Lieberman, exposed, if you will, for the first time that the government, the Netanyahu government, is supporting and supplying the Abu Shabab. And there's really an issue now within the way the Middle East works. Is that good or is that bad for Israel? Does it secure Israel? Does it further destabilize the Hamas? And my view is that it is not such a bad decision because you're in the middle of a war. We're trying to destabilize Hamas in every way possible. We're not looking at Abu Shabab as the ultimate leader of the Palestinians. But for now, anything that destabilizes the Hamas right now and cooperates with Israel is a good thing.
Then it's a tactic.
Right. It's not a strategy.
It's not a strategy and not a long-term solution. But here's the problem. What Lieberman did is counterproductive. Lieberman has killed the idea. Lieberman has played into the hands of Hamas because now Hamas is saying these This new militia is backed by Israel. These are traitors. These are collaborators. He gave Hamas ammunition to fight against a militia that is prepared to help Israel. And this is, a pity, because now anyone who raises his voice against Hamas in Gaza will be accused of being associated with this group, and Hamas will use Lieberman's statement as an excuse to go after them. Hamas will say, you see, I have to fight because here, the former defense minister of Israel is openly admitting that these people are collaborators, they are traitors, they are funded and armed by Israel. And that's very bad. So what he did, he actually killed the idea. From now on, Israel is going to find it very difficult to find allies in Gaza who are prepared to work with Israel.
Yeah, it's a good point, meaning you've got to be able to trust your ally, or is certainly those with whom you're cooperating, that they won't expose you. In the meantime, Abu Shabab has not backed off. He is still holding steady, and he has a force of several thousand men. If I'm not mistaken, or between 1,000 and 2,000.
Yeah, I don't think anyone really knows. I mean, look, he does have control over certain parts of southern Gaza. I do hear that from people in Gaza. They're talking about several hundred people. But the question is, for how long can they continue with this? Are we witnessing, is this a momentum, or will it stop? The Abu Shabab militia is under huge pressure. From the local people, from their own families also. Their own clans are issuing statements disowning them and distancing themselves from them and calling them traitors. And the Arab media is full of reports that these are the traitors and these are, they need to be executed. And this is bad. So, I mean, the less Israel talks about it, the better, by the way. But the more you talk about it, the more you are providing ammunition to Hamas. You are actually undermining this group that is trying to help Israel.
At the same time, when we look at the humanitarian situation now, it's the so-called humanitarian situation, notwithstanding the fact there are 53 Israeli and other hostages being held in the Gaza death tunnels, being starved to death. That's the only starvation strategy going on in Gaza today. On the other hand, this new American-Israeli local plan seems to be working. There are 1.5 million meals that have been delivered in the last few days alone, and it looks like there is more sense of humanitarian order going on the ground.
Look, and that's why Hamas is nervous, by the way. Because
that's their last leverage point.
Yes, you've taken from them a very important card, which is the humanitarian aid. It's a pity Israel did not do it 18 months ago and 16 months ago and 17 months ago. You allowed Hamas to be in charge of the humanitarian aid, which was a big problem. It was a big mistake, by the way. Now, Israel is doing it. Now, Israel has taken that card from Hamas's hands, and Israel is now distributing the aid through the Americans or whatever. But what is important is that Hamas is no longer in charge of the distribution of humanitarian aid, and this is undermining Hamas's credibility. It's undermining Hamas's grip over the Gaza Strip, and that's why we saw a few hours ago, I saw some reports that Hamas executed some of the Palestinians who are working with the distribution aid center, the Gaza Humanitarian Aid Center. And we need to follow now and see what's going to happen. Will this deter other Palestinians from working, or will the Palestinians just, continue moving on and moving away from Hamas?
Well, that's the real question is, how close are we, in your view, to a tipping point in which the Hamas, either lower level, mid-level command just completely collapses? We see the majority of the leaders are sitting in Qatar. I mean, everyone from Khaled Mashal to another 6 or 7, even local leaders on the ground are now sitting in Qatar. So there doesn't seem to be any real serious command structure left.
Look, no one knows today who is in charge of the military arm or the military wing of Hamas inside Gaza. With the death of Yahya Sinwar
and Mohammed
Sinwar and all the other military commanders, it's not really clear who is running the show over there, who is in charge of the Azzeddin al-Qassam armed wing of Hamas. When I look at the situation in Gaza today, 20 months after the war, I see that Israel has succeeded in eliminating probably 95% of Hamas's top military leadership. The military leadership is sitting inside Gaza. The political leadership is sitting outside Gaza. Israel has still not gone after the political leadership outside Gaza, with the exception of Ismail Haniyeh, who was killed in Iran. You see that the other political leaders of Hamas are still sitting in Qatar, in Turkey, and Algeria, and Lebanon, and God knows where. How do we know? Because they keep appearing on Al Jazeera, and they're very active on social media, issuing statements and all that. But they're sitting outside Gaza. Who is running the show in Gaza? We don't know right now. I think, as you said, it's mid-level or low-level activists, and this raises very serious questions. Don't forget, Israel is now in control of more than 50% of Gaza, security control, and Hamas is feeling the heat inside Gaza. So now we need to see who's running the show over there, who's issuing orders, who is telling the military wing what to do and what not to do in Gaza.
It seems that in this real tectonic shift taking place in Gaza, that the idea of total victory is not a fantasy anymore, but in fact, we're getting closer to a point in which we can collapse, and the local population in Gaza will see that there is a collapse of Hamas. And then as long as Israel continues to assert its political will, there is a possibility for this Trump vision of humanitarian, voluntary relocation into other countries in the Middle East could actually take place.
Look, regarding Trump's vision, I said before that, after Trump announced his plan, I don't even know if it's a plan, by the way, after he made that statement.
It's a feeling.
Yeah. After he made that statement, I was talking to people in Gaza about it to see what are their reactions. And many people told me, listen, it doesn't sound bad, but why is he offering us to go to Jordan and Egypt? Why doesn't he come with a better offer? We want to go to Europe, we want to go to Canada, we want to go to the U.S. And only if, Egypt opens the border, you will see people leaving voluntarily. We're not waiting for Trump to tell us to leave. So this is the Palestinian position regarding the Trump plan. Now, you mentioned something earlier about there was another point you mentioned.
Yeah, I was talking about, how do we make can you make the Trump vision a reality? Total victory is what I was talking about.
Total victory.
Yeah.
Look, Dan, total victory can be achieved only when there is a new government in Gaza. It doesn't matter who. It can be a military government of Israel. It can be a local leadership. It can be an Arab government. Once there's a new government in Gaza, that will be a game changer. In my opinion, that's the game changer. Do to Hamas what Hamas did to the Palestinian Authority. Someone needs to go into Gaza and declare, I'm the new government in Gaza. Stage a coup against Hamas so that people will understand that there's a new sheriff in town. If you don't do that, there's a vacuum. And
so the only way that Israel can fill that is if Israel says we're the new government in Gaza right now.
Israel or someone else. But as long as there's no other government in Gaza, Hamas is the government. Mm-hmm. That's in the eyes of the local population and in the eyes of the world, Hamas is still in control of Gaza. There is a Hamas government. Okay, many of its members have been killed. Many of its installations have been destroyed. But because there is no other government, as long as people are concerned, Hamas remains the government. That's why I'm saying the mere declaration, the mere announcement that there's a new government in Gaza will be a game changer. It sends a message that there's a new sheriff in town, that the other government does not exist. This is what Hamas did to the Palestinian Authority in 2007. Hamas was back then less than 15,000 members. they dragged a number of Palestinian Authority people to the streets. They lynched them. They threw some of them from the rooftops. And Hamas immediately announced, I'm the new government in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
When people saw that announcement and heard that announcement, they said, okay, the Palestinian Authority is finished. Even Palestinian Authority people surrendered to Hamas because they too knew that the game was over. There's a new sheriff in town. And that's the only way to do it then. Israel can do it by establishing a temporary military government. Israel can do it by facilitating the arrival of a new Palestinian government. Local people, I don't know. I mean, I don't see the Palestinian Authority going back anytime soon. I also don't see Arab countries coming into Gaza. So for now, maybe it would be a good idea if Israel assumed control over Gaza on a temporary basis until someone else can take it over from Israel. That's the only way.
One of the key aspects that you've mentioned a number of times we've talked about is what they call perception warfare or strategic influence, what they say in Hebrew, toda'ah. And it seems that where Israel's been very weak, where the United States has historically been stronger on this issue opposite the former Soviet Union, but now less so in the face of radical Islamic terror, even the supporters of which are tearing up Los Angeles as we speak, and in the Middle East, of course. But Israel's got to get much better at driving perception warfare, because from Gaza to Tehran to Sana'a to Damascus, this is the way war works.
Yes.
And power works in the Middle East.
Take, for example, what happened in Syria. We saw the militias marching on Damascus. Then we saw the militias, or the so-called rebels, sitting in the palace, in the presidential palace in Damascus. And for people, that was enough. It's all about perception. For them, the former regime is finished. We don't know how many rebels marched on Damascus, but when people in Syria see that, there's someone sitting in the presidential palace, for them, that's, the game is over. That's why I'm saying Israel should adopt the same tactics. You need to send a message that there is a new sheriff in town that will facilitate your mission, that will accelerate the demise of Hamas, and that will even encourage Palestinians to walk up to you and help you and say, Hamas is there, the hostages are there. But there's a vacuum, and that worries me. We don't know who is in control of Gaza. Okay, Israel has a security presence here and there, but it's not stable. It's not also formal. It's not official.
Yeah. So you're saying the statement and the visual act beyond the kinetic counterterrorism is just as important.
It's much more important than the rubble. It's much more important than seeing destroyed buildings. It's much more important to see an IDF officer sitting in the headquarters of Hamas in Gaza City than seeing destroyed buildings. Because when you see an Israeli flag over the Hamas offices in Gaza City, that means, the previous government is finished. That means there's a new government. That means you have created a new fact on the ground. That's very important.
Does the Arab world see a new major fact on the ground in President Trump's recent trip to the Gulf, which didn't include Israel? I claim it did not snub Israel per se. It was meant to be a message to the Arab world that there's a new sheriff in the Middle East, and his name is Donald Trump. And I want to get your thinking on this, because from where I sat, watching 12 Arabian horses with American flags escorting the U.S. presidential limousine down after the runway in Riyadh, said to me, this is the strong horse in the Middle East. The man comes in, he brings several $1 trillion in commitments. Whether or not that will actually play out, we don't know. But the image of it, because right now we're talking about image and perception in the Middle East, Does that not say that he is the new economic warrior in town? He is the new sheriff, and it sort of brings us into this conversation because we're talking about Iran, Tehran, a potential attack by the United States, the Arab world's response. It seems to me that the Arab world is saying, wait a second, this is a strong horse in Washington who's come to the Middle East. That's why it may be a very good time to attack Tehran right now.
Dan, I draw a distinction between Arab reactions towards the Trump administration in his first term and now in his second term. In his first term, the Arabs were very skeptical. They looked at Trump as being a pawn or a puppet in the hands of the Zionists and Israel. They denounced him as one of the most hostile American presidents towards the Palestinians, towards the Arabs. I look at the Arab attitudes towards Trump now, and I see that the tone has changed. I see that they are looking at him through a different, view. Now they see him as someone who is much more stable, much more balanced, as someone who is not as hostile towards Arabs or towards Palestinians as he was in the past. But Trump is Trump. And when it comes to Trump, it's very hard to predict. But I do see that more and more people in the Arab world are beginning to look at Trump, in a different way, in a less hostile way. And they're even beginning to wonder, maybe this man, is not against us as, we thought he is. And that's a very important thing. Now, in his last visit to the Gulf states, I did see some Arabs express satisfaction that he did not visit Israel, that Israel was excluded. The way they see it is that maybe Trump is about to throw Israel under the bus. Maybe Trump wants Arab money. Maybe he wants to do business with the Arabs, and it will come at the cost of Israel. You do hear these things, but as I said, it's very hard to predict. When it comes to Trump, it's very hard to predict. Now, they're looking at him and waiting to see what will he do with Iran, for example, the Saudis, the other Gulf states. If he is tough with Iran, and if he doesn't sign a bad deal with Iran, then you will see more and more Arabs coming forward. But if he signs a bad deal with Iran, like Obama did, by the way, then you will see that the Arabs will not see him as a very strong man of the Middle East, as his image of being a powerful leader will be shattered. It will be undermined.
Yeah, and there you have Saudi Arabia, who's licking its fingers towards the 2030 vision. The Crown Prince, I think, having a substantial amount of influence over the president in the president's, let's call it enthusiasm over a possible Nobel Prize. At the end of the day, he positioned himself as a man that's going to end all wars, a man that's going to bring stability, security, and peace to the Middle East. And at the end of the day, whether this really requires an absolute mobilization and execution of massive power to destroy Iran, because to destroy the Iranian regime and its nuclear program, and the regime, to cause regime change in Iran, that can lead to a completely different region, that the likes of which we haven't seen in 100 years.
I think that if Trump indeed wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize, he needs to support the war on terrorism. You need to fight against the enemies of peace, and not appease the enemies of peace, and not strike any deals with them. That's the only way for him to win that prize, that award. But striking a deal with the Houthis and talking directly to Hamas and believing that you can reach some kind of an agreement with Hamas and Hezbollah, and it doesn't work like that. You need to send a very powerful message that there is no room in the Middle East, even on the face of earth, for all these terrorists, for all these terror groups. And you also need to send a very strong message to the Iranian regime. Number one, to stop their support for these Islamist proxies. And number two, that the U.S. will not accept an Iran with nuclear weapons. This these have to be red lines. That's the only way for him to win the award, if they want to give it to him, by the way.
And that's
another issue.
I think you said it very well. Laying down the red lines in the Middle East, we seem to be coming to that red line regarding Iran and regarding Gaza, and we're going to have to follow this very carefully because we seem to be at a very critical moment right now in the Middle East. It can go both ways, but as they say, inshallah, God willing, it will go towards what you and I have been talking about for several decades, which is the possibility of a region that is more secure, more stable, more prosperous, and even, and here's that word again, even more peaceful, but only after the exercise of massive power, political intention, political will, and
total defeat of the enemies of peace, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. Not only defeat, they have to be humiliated. That will create deterrence. That's the only way.
There you have it. That's Al-Shaq Al-Awsat Lana.
Yeah.
That's our Middle East.
Yeah.
Khaled, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.